Alright, I have a simple question. Based off the stats you see on your screen, taken from a 2-year stretch, which pitcher would you want on your team going forward? I want to keep this a little bit ambiguous, just know that they're each entering their age 31 season. I know, you already know who these guys are based off the thumbnail and title, but in the blind polls I did on my community tab and Twitter, I got some interesting results. Over 70% of voters chose pitcher B. Pitcher B is J.R. Richards, age 29 and 30 seasons. The vast majority of voters chose Richard over Jacob deGrom at the same age. You can see just how similar they were statistically. To contextualize these stats, run scoring league-wide was lower when Richard played, and the Astrodome was incredibly pitcher-friendly, even more so than Citi Field. But they were the best pitchers in baseball in these respective seasons. I'm here to make the argument that J.R. Richard was well on his way to becoming a Jacob deGrom level pitcher before his career was cut short. But first, I brought in my good friend Baseball AF to remind all of you just how historically great deGrom is.
Hi, I love Jacob deGrom. He's putting together a career unlike anyone we've ever seen, and here are numbers to prove it. With a minimum of 198 games started, deGrom is literally the best pitcher in the entire history of baseball, with an adjusted ERA plus of 157. With those same constraints, deGrom has the second best K percent and is one of 3 pitchers ever with a strikeout to walk ratio over 5. He is the first pitcher since 1927 to have a career FIP below 2.67, his being 2.64. deGrom is one of 4 pitchers in the history of baseball to hold batters to an OPS plus against of less than 70, the others being Pedro Martinez, Clayton Kershaw, and Roger Clemens. From 2018 to 2021, Jacob deGrom is hitting at a 47 OPS plus. Batters against him in the same stretch have an OPS plus of 48. So deGrom turns MLB players, all of them, into 2019 Corbin Burns at the plate. Now, I love perspective, so let's find some more. There are 22 pitchers who have had 50 or more 10-plus strikeout games over the course of their careers. deGrom is all the way down here at 18th. That's not bad. But this is a counting stat. The longer you pitch, the more you get, especially if you're like Nolan Ryan. So let's set these as a percentage of their total starts. And would you look at that, Jacob deGrom has the second highest percent of his starts that are 10-plus strikeout games. He's right in between Randy Johnson and Nolan Ryan. And look, there's New York Met Max Scherzer. I couldn't help mention that. I'm sorry. Last thing. In 2021, deGrom put up, by far, one of the most dominant months ever in baseball. In June, he held opponents to an OPS of 282. An average OPS is roughly 750. His split SOPS plus for that month was negative 22. The average is 100. deGrom is breaking the game of baseball, and we get the privilege of watching him do it.
Please go check out Baseball AF's channel and Twitter. He makes great videos about interesting statistics and explaining just how great players are. Now that we've contextualized deGrom's greatness and historical significance to this centuries-old game, I have to convince you that J.R. Richard was approaching that level. First things first, let's talk about debuts. I know I have a lot of Mets fans watching this, and most of you probably remember Jake's debut during the 2014 Subway Series. This game ended up being a microcosm of his time with the Mets so far. In typical deGrom fashion, he went 7 innings, allowed 1 run, and collected one of the Mets' 3 hits in a losing effort. It was a great game, and Mets fans were excited for a new addition to their rotation, but his first game wasn't as electric as, let's say, Steven Strasburg's debut. Y'all remember that? Most anticipated pitching debut ever when he struck out 14 Pirates? Well, James Rodney Richards' debut makes Steven Strasburg's debut look as lame as my YouTube debut. Only one problem. It wasn't televised. How can I possibly capture the greatness of this game without any footage to back it up? Hang on. I know someone who can help me here. Facing the soon-to-be NL West champion Giants, JR spun the gem. In the complete game victory, he allowed just 2 earned runs and struck out 15 batters. Nobody has struck out 15 in a debut since, and only one other man had done it before him. The biggest travesty is that this game was only broadcast on local radio, and the only people who've ever seen this performance were in the park that day. I have to imagine that the fans in Candlestick watched on in awe as some kid they'd never heard of before struck out Bobby Bonds twice and Willie Mays 3 times. Despite his galvanizing debut, Richard wasn't a regular in the Astros rotation for another few seasons. He was just 21 when he debuted, and he was much more raw than 26-year-old deGrom was when he made his first start. JR wouldn't be a full-time starter for the Astros until he was 25. The similarities between these two go beyond the stats, and before we get into more numbers, let's take a look at what makes them great pitchers. Richard was listed at 6'8" and 222 pounds, while deGrom is 6'4" and about 180 pounds. While Richard was much bigger, and he even said he got up to 240 pounds at just 3% body fat, both used their ridiculous length as leverage to throw fireballs. Using pitch tracking data, we know that deGrom throws his four-seam fastball and slider as his two main pitches, throwing them over 90% of the time. His fastball has the highest average velocity in the game right now at over 99 miles per hour. His slider is also the fastest in the game and has topped 95 miles per hour in the past. He also throws the occasional changeup, but he thrives off of the two-pitch mix. We don't have any pitch tracking data from Richard's era, but he was also known for his high 90s fastball that touched triple digits and his power slider, which could reportedly reach upwards of 94 miles per hour. He also used the high fastball as a strikeout pitch decades before it was common. Many batters who faced him claimed he was the toughest pitcher to face because of his incredible stuff, imposing size, and wild delivery. Take it from Dave Winfield. If we were able to analyze Richard's stuff with modern pitch tracking, based on how he was described by his peers and how the footage looks, I bet he would be nearly identical to deGrom. The main difference between the two is that deGrom is known for his control, whereas Richard was even more intimidating because he was wild. JR led the league in walks and wild pitches 3 times each. Despite this, he never hit many batters. I'd bet that's because his pitch combo worked up and down rather than side to side, and most of his wild pitches and balls were likely the result of sailed fastballs or buried sliders. Although it took him a few years to get his control issues, well, under control, he became a full-time starter in 1975 and an effective starter in 1976. In that season, at just 26 years old, he won 20 games while pitching to a 2.75 ERA in nearly 300 innings. He was just the 9th African-American pitcher to win 20 games in a season, joining the distinguished Black Aces. JR was finally living up to the potential that got him selected second overall out of high school. It could be said that both him and deGrom were late bloomers, as both broke out at age 26, with Jacob winning Rookie of the Year in his age 26 season. While deGrom was very solid in his age 27 and 28 seasons, he didn't quite stand out like Richard. JR's age 27 and 28 seasons were pretty similar to each other, but in 1978, he led the league in walks, strikeouts, hits per 9, fielding independent pitching, and wild pitches. He scared hitters off the plate, blew the fastball by him, and had him chasing sliders in the dirt, leading to him becoming the first righty in the National League to strike out over 300 batters in one season. He was the most effectively wild pitcher in the game besides Nolan Ryan, who just so happened to join Richard on the Astros pitching staff in 1980. But before we get there, we have to talk about 1979. JR took a big step towards becoming the best pitcher in baseball in his age 29 season. He finished 3rd place in Cy Young voting, but the most impressive part of his season is that he cut down his walks by a third while maintaining a similar strikeout rate to the previous year. His better command didn't mean that hitters got more comfortable in the box though, as he still led the league in wild pitches. He again led qualified pitchers in hits per 9 and also led the league in both ERA and strikeouts per walk for the first time.
Although Jacob deGrom had some struggles in his age 29 season, he turned the corner in June after a talk with manager Terry Collins during a game against the Texas Rangers where he was roughed up pretty bad. This began his ascent to the top of the league. He was excellent after his first 2 months of struggling, finishing in the top 10 of most stats in his final 19 starts of the season. Both Jacob deGrom and J.R. Richard entered elite territory during their age 29 seasons, but both also became the undisputed best pitcher in baseball at age 30.
I'm not going to take a deep dive into deGrom's first Cy Young season, but in 217 innings, he finished with a 170 ERA and 218 ERA+, one of the best seasons in modern history. And Richard's 1980 season may have been even greater than that if it wasn't cut short. He started off with 48 strikeouts and a 167 ERA in 37 2/3 innings in April. He only gave up 13 hits, including just 3 for extra bases, all of which were doubles. This equates to an opponent's slugging percentage of 128, the 4th lowest ever in a 5-start span during the integration era. But this wasn't even his best 5-start stretch of the season. After a blow-up start on May 5th, he threw 2 more great games, but starting on May 21st, he allowed just 1 earned run in the next 45 innings over 5 starts. This included a stretch of 3 straight complete game shutouts from May 31st through June 11th. He was at the very peak of his game. Through 96 innings on the year, he had only given up 16 earned runs, had over 9 strikeouts per 9, under 3 walks per 9, and just barely over 5 hits per 9. He also hadn't allowed 1 single homer and had allowed just 10 extra base hits on the year. If you take out that blow-up start from early May, he'd have a 1.13 ERA at this point in the season. Unfortunately, he'd only make 5 more Major League appearances after his June 11th shutout. Around this point in the season, Richard began to complain of shoulder and forearm soreness, saying that it felt as if his arm was dead. He was pulled after just 5 quality innings on June 17th, and he went on to miss his next start. It was the first start he'd missed in years, but the Astros didn't think it was serious, and his arm wasn't examined. He made 2 more starts before the All-Star break. He continued to speak about his arm soreness publicly, but the media and team chalked his concerns up as complaints, as he was still reaching triple digits on the radar gun.
I felt fatigueness in my arm, and wasn't feeling strong and powerful like I've been feeling, which I've told the Houston Astros a number of times.
News coverage wasn't empathetic, with many in the media painting him as moody, egotistical, lazy, and jealous of teammate Nolan Ryan's contract. But he was the NL's All-Star Game starter, and he wasn't going to miss his first All-Star game because of some arm soreness. As he took the mound for that game, the broadcasters forebodingly mentioned his arm troubles.
James Rodney Richard. He comes in, however, after struggling in his last couple of starts. He has been experiencing stiffness in his right forearm. He uses the word fatigue to describe it.
He grinded it out, striking out Reggie Jackson, Carlton Fisk, and pitcher Steve Stone in 2 scoreless innings. His fastball reached triple digits multiple times, and he threw a 94-mile-per-hour slider to strike out Jackson. To a national TV audience, he looked sharp as ever, which raised further skepticism about his injury complaints. He was scheduled to go deeper into the game, but was pulled due to back and shoulder soreness. Richard had a checkup after the break in Houston, where they didn't find any significant problems, and he was scheduled to pitch as usual. But his next start would be his last. After a 1-2-3 inning against the Braves, he struck out the side in the second. He got through the third unscathed after allowing a double, and even hit a double of his own off of Phil Niekro. He started off the top of the 4th by walking Dale Murphy. He then induced a grounder that would have been a double play if not for a throwing error by the shortstop. Suddenly, catcher Luis Pujols called out the trainers after the play, and J.R. Richard was pulled from his last big league game. It turns out his vision was so blurry that he couldn't even see the catcher's signs, and his arm was so numb that he couldn't feel the ball in his fingers. Something was wrong. The Astros placed him on the 21-day DL, and when he was examined by a specialist, they found a blood clot in his right shoulder, but they said it wasn't serious enough to require surgery. He was just told to rest his arm, and the team didn't pursue any further diagnosis or treatment.
There's no chance of him hurting himself seriously. He's agreed to pitch, so he's pitching.
I think the type of tired arm he's got is better that he worked regularly.
They say, oh, he black, it's all in his head. So it's one of those things that has gone through the years, it's all in his head.
He was the best player on the Astros, and they didn't even consider getting him examined further. That's just mind-boggling to me. Near the end of the month, the team went on a road trip, but JR stayed in Houston and began preparing to return to the mound. While having a catch early on July 30th, he felt nauseous and collapsed on the Astrodome turf. JR was rushed to the hospital, where emergency surgery got blood flowing back to his brain and saved his life. He not only had a clot in his shoulder, but he also had one in his neck, which impeded blood flow straight to his brain. He had not 1, not 2, but 3 simultaneous strokes. It turns out he was pitching with thoracic outlet syndrome, which could have been easily diagnosed if he was pitching now just based on the symptoms. Heck, it would have been easily diagnosed then if the team just took his concerns seriously and got him examined. This clip from his teammate, Enos Cabell, sums up my feelings about this situation based on what I know.
Well, it had to be a racial element from the press. The press were terrible. I don't think he missed a turn at all in his spot in the rotation. And then all of a sudden they're saying that it was drugs. He didn't want to pitch. He was mad at somebody. And I'm sitting there, I'm looking at this, and I said, well, we're not going by the facts here. This guy's never missed a start. He's never begged off a start. He's started every game that he's been, and he's probably gone, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 innings and everything. And now he says he's hurt and nobody wants to believe him. What would you call it? I mean, it couldn't be anything else. And this was still the South. And I don't care, they still got some people that are still in the press. They're still, and they know they were wrong. And then when they found out what happened, not a one of them apologized. Not a one of them apologized to him. They just said, well, JR is this and JR is that. That was a bunch of bull. What else could it be?
JR wasn't an especially warm and fuzzy guy, but he was treated with unbelievable negligence by his own team. This guy was at the top of his game and nearly unhittable. Why would he BS injury symptoms now? He would have been one of the highest paid pitchers in the game the second he hit free agency the way he was pitching. It just doesn't make any sense. Do you think the team would tell Nolan Ryan that his pain was all in his head? Would they have told him to just gut it out? Would the media ever question Nolan Ryan's dedication to his team and to the game? Richard hadn't missed a start in over 5 seasons, and he was second in all of baseball, only to knuckleballer Phil Niekro in innings pitched and games started in the previous 4 seasons. He was the epitome of a workhorse and earned the right to the benefit of the doubt, but he was ridiculed into oblivion for raising his concerns concerns publicly, and nobody even apologized when all was said and done. JR tried to come back after 18 months of physical therapy to restore strength and movement to the left side of his body, which had been partially paralyzed. Despite a successful rehab and his arm being healthy, he just wasn't the same pitcher or athlete as he was before the stroke. The Astros cut him in early 1984, and he didn't get calls from any other teams. He thinks that he may have been blackballed from the league, which is very well possible considering the era we're talking about here. It's also possible that teams didn't want him because of how outspoken he'd been in the past. It's hard to imagine that not one single team would take a chance on someone as talented as him. He went on to file a lawsuit against the Astros and the doctors who recommended no action after finding the blood clot, and he won over $1 million in a settlement, but he could have gotten more if not for the Pittsburgh drug trials. It was revealed that Richard was a cocaine user during his playing days, and he allegedly used coke during 1980. Even though doctors have said that possible cocaine usage had nothing to do with these strokes, public opinion on recreational drug use at the time was very negative to say the least, even though many who held these opinions were also privately recreational drug users. Long story short, his alleged cocaine use proved to be an obstacle in court, and rather than winning the $20 million that he filed for and probably deserved, he settled. And that $1 million didn't last. After retirement, JR went through 2 separate divorces and made some bad investments, which led to his home being foreclosed on in 1993. He was depressed, unemployed, and homeless just 13 years after being the most feared pitcher in the world. He was still ascending before his injury. He could have been Jacob deGrom. He should have been Nolan Ryan. But as his former teammate was pitching at age 46 for the Rangers, JR was living under a highway overpass getting harassed by drug addicts. This is the point in the story where a lesser person would have given up. Despite being at rock bottom, JR's faith stuck with him. He sought help from the local New Testament church in Houston. Reverend Floyd Lewis helped JR turn his life around. He was able to find a job to support himself, and he spent his time at the church helping homeless people find food and shelter, eventually becoming a minister himself. I'm not a particularly religious person, and I don't want this video to become real preachy, but JR's faith gave him a chance to get back on his feet, and he was able to turn his life around and help others who were in similar situations. Before we finish up here, let's get back to baseball. I know the surgery required to resolve thoracic outlet syndrome has killed some careers in the past, but with JR's build and natural talent, I think he could have been at least a good pitcher if he got proper treatment. It certainly would have been easier to go through a normal surgery and rehab process rather than taking 1.5 years to return the left side of his body to full strength. The similarities between him and deGrom's career arcs and pitching styles are impossible not to notice, and it's a travesty that his cries for help were dismissed at least partially because of the biases that some around him held. The Astros probably would have won multiple World Series titles in the 80s if they had Richard even at half strength. Just imagine a 1986 rotation of Mike Scott, Nolan Ryan, and J.R. Richard. He'd probably still be the Astros strikeout leader, and there's a good chance he would have been in the Hall of Fame today if he was able to finish out his career.
What do you think about?
Sometimes the ifs and what ifs. Then at the same sense, I'm thinking about that it wasn't. So what are you going to do now? Because this is the hand you dealt with. You learn how to play cards. You get up and live or you lay down and die. So you choose one. And to live is what I've chosen.
James Rodney Richard passed away on August 4th of 2021 due to complications with COVID. This man was at the highest peak in the baseball world in July of 1980, but hit the lowest of valleys just over a decade later. The fact that he was able to fight all the way back from the brink and live out his life in a more than respectable way should tell you enough about the man's resolve and mental strength. The Astros should honor his legacy by retiring his number 50. He may be the greatest talent to have ever worn an Astros jersey, and it's an absolute travesty that it hasn't yet been retired.